Hello everybody, my name is ProfRich and today we are talking about phrasal verbs. Everybody loves phrasal verbs, don't they? Do you love phrasal verbs? So today we'll be starting with a quiz. I'll ask you some questions about phrasal verbs. I want you to tell me if the statements are true or false. You can say that in the chat. After we do our true-false quiz, we will have some listening practice. Then we're going to learn some phrasal verbs. Well, it's a class on phrasal verbs, so that makes sense. Then we'll talk about rules, phrasal verb rules, the grammar of phrasal verbs. Then we'll learn some more phrasal verbs. And finally, we'll have a free discussion using have you ever or have you ever. Have you ever? Okay, so let's move on. Let's do our little quiz here. True or false? Look at the statements here about phrasal verbs, and I want you to answer true or false about those statements. If the statement is false, can you correct the statement? And I don't really have anywhere to put myself here without getting in the way. I'll have to go up there. It's a little bit small and in the corner. Hello to everybody. Hello to Manjula. Hello, Manuel. Hello, Sleepwalker. Hello, Dreamer. Hello, Anawat. Hello, Takeshi. Hello, Heishan Prabhashwara. How are you doing, Heishan? Hello to Sonia Botarini. And hello to Manuel Gordillo. Welcome everybody to today's stream. Today we are talking about phrasal verbs. I am a language teacher. I've been teaching English for 15 years. I come from England. I've lived in Spain, Japan, Canada, Scotland, England, Vietnam, and Mexico. Sort of. And I'm British, in case you're not sure where England is. And may I say hello there to Hint. How are you? So we have a number of answers in the chat already. I'll give you just another 30 seconds to get your answers in here. Okay, number one, phrasal verbs are often more common than non-phrasal synonyms. For example, set up a company or start a company. Which one is more common? Well, actually, it depends on the context. So, although in common speaking, phrasal verbs are more common. So, when you're speaking colloquially on the street, when you're having a conversation, phrasal verbs are more common. However, in other contexts, sometimes the non-phrasal synonym could be more common. So, I'm going to say true most of the time. Number two, phrasal verbs are two words, a verb and a preposition is false. That is just one type of phrasal verb. So there are many types of phrasal verb. One type of phrasal verb is verb plus preposition. You can also have verb plus adverb, or verb plus preposition plus adverb, or verb plus adverb plus preposition. And if you want to get fancy about it, you can have longer phrasal verbs as well. So there's many types of phrasal verbs. They are verb plus any combination of preposition and adverbs. Phrasal verbs must not be separated is false. Some phrasal verbs can be separated. In some situations, phrasal verbs must be separated. And some phrasal verbs cannot be separated. So actually there are a range of possibilities. Phrasal verbs are always idiomatic. Idiomatic means something doesn't have a literal meaning. So, for example, if I say, have a coffee, that doesn't have a literal meaning. Because with have a coffee, I mean drink a coffee. I'm having a coffee right now. And it's very nice. That meaning of have is not literal, so we can say that it's idiomatic. Now, are phrasal verbs always idiomatic? No, they are not. Some phrasal verbs are literal. For example, get up. I got up at 7 a.m. Get up, because you get up. That's literal. It's not idiomatic. Number 5, phrasal verbs often have several... Hello? Often have several what? Have several meanings. Phrasal verbs often have several meanings. It's true. Phrasal verbs do often have several meanings. But that's the same as any other phrase or vocabulary in English. Actually, in all languages, most phrases and words have more than one meaning. That's life. Don't worry about it too much. So yes, phrasal verbs often have several meanings, just like everything else. Any questions about that, feel free to ask in the chat. And hello to Elsa Latorre. How are you doing, Elsa? So, moving on swiftly with a full screen cam. Hello, everybody. I'm going to read some information about phrasal verbs, and I want you to see if you can spot the phrasal verbs when I'm talking, folks, all right? Okay, folks, let's brush up on our phrasal verbs. We're going to go over about 15 phrasal verbs today. There's a lot to talk about, but we'll try not to run over. Make sure you join in the class using the live chat, which is over there, I think, on PC. And after the stream, check out our awesome community on Discord. The link is down below the video. Hang on, because here comes our first task. I want you to point out all the phrasal verbs in this text and match them to the synonyms. All right, the text is now on your screen. I want you to point out the phrasal verbs in the text and match them to the synonyms below. The synonyms are at the bottom. There are 7 phrasal verbs in the text, but there are only 6 synonyms. That's because one of the phrasal verbs one of the synonyms matches to 2 phrasal verbs. I'm going to play a recording reading that again. Okay, folks, let's brush up on our phrasal verbs. We're going to go over about 15 phrasal verbs today. There's a lot to talk about, but we'll try not to run over. Make sure you join in the class using the live chat, and after the stream, check out our awesome community on Discord. Link is down below the video. Hang on, because here comes our first task. I want you to point out all the phrasal verbs in this text and match them to the synonyms. All right, so that gives you another go at that. I recorded that this morning. Seemed like my pronunciation was slightly different this morning. I feel a headache coming on again. I've been getting headaches quite a bit recently. So lots of excellent participation in the chat. Well done, Sleepwalker and Anawat. Brush up on his review. You are correct. Takeshi says go over is review. I think that's close, but I think there's a better option. Run over is exceed time limit. That's right, Takeshi. Hang on, wait. Yes, yes, yes. Very good. I'm going to just highlight all of the phrasal verbs for you here. So those phrasal verbs are now highlighted. These are the 7 phrasal verbs. Brush upon is review. So in order we have... Let's make this green. We've got brush upon. Okay. I'm doing this the special way, folks. That's review. Go over. What did I have for that? Examine. Indicate. Participate. You know what? I've changed my mind. Changed my mind. Takeshi, that was a good answer. Review or examine. Then we got run over. Run over is exceed time limit. And then we got join in, which is participate. And then I've run out of space. One of these days I will learn how to use Google Docs in an effective manner, but that day is not today. Check out, which means examine. Hang on, which means wait. And finally, point out, which means indicate. So there's our answers on your screen right now. Does anyone have any questions? And hello to Vladimir. By the way, everybody, smash that like button if you're enjoying the stream. And if you're not enjoying the stream, then let me know in the chat and I'll do what I can to help you out there. I'm going to give you 1 minute to ask any questions that you have about these phrasal verbs in the chat before we move on. Join in sounds literal. Yeah, pretty literal. That's a good task, actually. Which of these are literal and which are not? What do you think about that? I think that brush up on is idiomatic. I think that go over is idiomatic. I think that run over is idiomatic. I think that join in is literal. I think check out, that's pretty idiomatic, but you could argue because of check, maybe it's literal. Hang on, that's idiomatic, but we can understand it at least. So it's just a little idiomatic. You can get the idea of hanging on. Point out. That sounds pretty literal, doesn't it? Point out. By the way, something being idiomatic is not a binary. It's not 0 and 1. Idiomatic is actually a scale. So some things are more literal. Some things are more idiomatic. Some things are very idiomatic. And here's a funny example for you. The adverb literally is very idiomatic. Let me type that in the chat. Literally as an adverb It's very idiomatic because I can say, I'm literally dying of laughter. I am literally dying of laughter. Literally. Of course, when I say I'm literally dying of laughter, I mean I'm figuratively or metaphorically dying of laughter. So in this case, the word literally actually means the exact opposite of the literal meaning of the word literally. It literally means the opposite of literally. And that would be perhaps very idiomatic. Okay, folks, let's talk about phrasal verb facts. So here's your rules. Your rules about phrasal verbs. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to tell you the rules and then I'll show you them. So, there's 4 rules. Rich's rules. Rich's rules. Rich's rules to review. Rich's rules to restrain rebellious phrasal verbs. Rich's rules to restrain rebellious phrasal verbs. Are you ready? Number 1. Phrasal verbs can be 2 or more words. The other words are adverbs and prepositions, but it's not really important to know that. You don't need to think about the prepositions and the adverbs. Just learn the phrasal verb as one phrase. It doesn't matter if it's 2 words, 3 words, or more. Just learn it as a phrase. And that phrase has a meaning. Number 2. Phrasal verbs can be idiomatic or literal. This is just like any other word or phrase in the language. They can be idiomatic or literal, just like any other phrase in the language. And in fact, just like any other phrase in any language. Number 3. Phrasal verbs can require no object, 1 object, or 2 objects. In grammar, this is called intransitive, transitive, and ditransitive verbs. And it's the same for normal verbs, single word verbs, and phrasal verbs. Number 4. Some 2-word phrasal verbs are separable. If so, with the use of pronouns like it, the phrasal verb must be separated. So if a phrasal verb is separable, then when you use it with a pronoun, you must separate it. So, they're my rules, they're my examples. Now, I'm going to show you those words, show you those rules with some words missing, and I want you to try and remember the missing words. All right? Are you ready? Let's do this. Okay, so there's 4 missing words there. 4 missing words. Do you remember the missing words from Rich's rules to restrain rebellious phrasal verbs? I'll give you another 30 seconds just to finish that. Make sure that you do smash that like button, especially if you just joined. YouTube loves it when you just join and smash that like button straight away. And while you do that, I'm going to get some paracetamol for my headache. I'll see you in just a second. All right, here comes your answers. So you can compare those to the answers, and they are Rich's rules to restrain rebellious phrasal verbs. Why I have that alliteration, I don't know. Are you ready to practice these rules? Let's try some practice. First question. In the phrasal verb come up with, come is a verb. What are the words up and with? In the phrasal verb come up with, come is a verb. What are the words up and with? I've noticed that from living in the UK for the last 4 years, my accent has started to change to incorporate some modern pronunciation features of English. That's including using the v sound with words like with. So I said with. In the phrasal verb come up with, that's a change in English that you hear that quite a bit now. At the end of words with a th, people say v instead, with. You get stuff like, instead of brother, you get brother, things like that. So Anawat says particle and preposition. Anawat, the word particle doesn't really have any meaning here. Particle just means small word, really. So it's not particularly helpful to say particle. You are right, it is adverb and preposition. Up is the adverb, with is the preposition. And of course, we know that after a preposition, you always have a noun. So we know that come up with is followed by a noun. The only exception, of course, is the word to. When after the word to, you often use the infinitive. Of course, it does depend. With 3-word phrasal verbs with to, you use a noun again. So it gets really complicated. But normally after a preposition, you use a noun. In fact, you always do unless the preposition is to, which is the weird exception to that. So we got, I've come up with a new idea. You can see there the use of a noun. And of course, if we want to use a verb, we use the verb in the ing form because the ing form of the verb is the noun. What ideas have you come up with? I've come up with having a big party tomorrow. That's my idea. What do you think about it? Right. Let's move on. B. Which of the following phrasal verbs has a literal meaning? Which of the following phrasal verbs have, a literal meaning? So I think there are two at least. Maybe three. So which of these phrasal verbs have a literal meaning? What do you think? Answers in the chat. Yeah, look forward to is a good example of a three-word phrasal verb that ends in to and actually is followed by a noun. So it's one of the exceptions to the exception. And I have talked about that before. The rule is, after a preposition, you put a noun. The exception is to. After to, you put infinitive. And the exception to that is when it's a three-word phrasal verb, like look forward to or get used to. Right, let's see which of these you think are literal. So 1, got up at 6 a.m. I think that's literal. Next, I got down to work at 8 a.m. That's not literal, that is idiomatic. Why get down to work? I got annoyed with my colleague, that is literal, in my opinion. I say get annoyed is literal. I got up to some great fun in the evening is idiomatic for sure. Get up to actually means do. So when someone says, what have you been getting up to this weekend? What have you been getting up to this weekend? It just means what have you been doing? What have you been doing? And I got to bed at around 11. Okay, you can say either way for that. Personally, I think it's quite literal, but it depends how you interpret the literal meaning of get. What is the literal meaning of get? That's an interesting question. For me, get to bed is quite literal, with get representing become, which for me is the literal meaning of get, is like become. So get to bed is like I become the location to bed. And that seems pretty literal to me. That's just my interpretation of that phrasal verb. Let's move on to C. Which of these are incorrect? Can you correct them? Take a look there. And just ignore that. Clicked on the wrong thing. So which of these are incorrect? We can actually number these. It might be a little bit easier. There you go. They're now numbered 1 to 4. Got answers coming in already. I will give you another 30 seconds to correct these phrasal verbs. And let's have a look at our vote while we finish up with that. So we have 67% saying that phrasal verbs are fun. And I'm very happy to hear that, because I think if you have the attitude that phrasal verbs are fun, you're more likely to find it easy to learn them. So that's fantastic. Good job. 20% say they're horrible. And yes, I do understand why people would say that phrasal verbs are horrible. They are tricky sometimes. It depends on your approach. And so-so, 12%. Yes. Well, actually, that's probably the worst reaction, because if they're neither horrible nor fun, you're just bored of them, then that's probably when they're most difficult, actually. They're probably easier if you think they're horrible. All right, so let's have a look here. Put the pen down, put down it. No, you didn't say the magic word. Put it down is the way to go there, because it is a separable phrasal verb. Separable, so must separate with small pronoun, okay? So if a phrasal verb is separable, then with a small pronoun, you must separate it. I need to pick up my daughter from school, correct. You need to look my cats after. No, it's not correct, because it's look after my cats. That is because look after is not separable. You cannot separate look after. All right. Number 4, I'm looking to Christmas forward. Nope. That is another one that you cannot separate. It's I'm looking forward to Christmas. Ta-da! So there's your answers. Any questions about that? Please do type your questions into the chat. Now I'm going to show you a question with a missing phrasal verb. From the phrasal verbs today, I want you to tell me what's the missing word. All right, there's the question on your screens right now. Can you tell me what's the missing word, love? Hello, love. What's the missing word then? What's the missing word? Sleepwalker says, Rich, look forward to. Is forward an adverb and to is a preposition? Sleepwalker, as I said, that is correct. Well done. However, as I also said, it is unimportant. But for linguistic syntax, we would consider forward to be an adverb and to be a preposition. You are correct. If you really get into the grammar, there is actually a distinction between phrasal verbs, prepositional verbs, and phrasal prepositional verbs. And so phrasal verbs are actually verb plus adverb. There is no preposition. And prepositional verbs are verb plus preposition. And then prepositional phrasal verbs are the 3-word ones like look forward to. However, I don't find that kind of analysis particularly useful, so I recommend not worrying too much about adverbs, prepositions, and so on. It's just verb plus particles, to use the term which Anawat alluded to earlier. So we had a few options there, and a few of those were okay. Go out to. We had set up. I'm going to say check out. And the question is, when was the last time you checked out a new restaurant? How was it? I would like to hear your answers there in the chat. So typing in the chat, when was the last time you checked out a new restaurant and how was it? When was the last time you checked out a new restaurant and how was it? Has anyone checked out a new restaurant recently? That means that you've gone to a new restaurant that you haven't been to before. Can I also say hello to Mapa Cherna in the chat, if that's how you say that. And also hello to Pallavi. How are you doing? Sleepwalker says maybe a year ago, if we're talking about a new restaurant. Well, it's not that a new restaurant, Sleepwalker, yeah. You could interpret this as being a new restaurant for you, or you could interpret it as being a restaurant that is new in your town. Elsa La Torre says, last weekend it was a Korean restaurant. Fantastic, Elsa. Was that Korean barbecue? Did you have Korean barbecue? What kind of food was it? I really like Korean barbecue. Korean barbecue is quite similar to Japanese barbecue, actually. And it's this idea of having a restaurant where you sort of barbecue your own food like this. It's quite fun. You have like a hot plate. It's become quite popular at the moment, actually. I'm alive, teacher. How are you? I'm good, Pallavi. It's good to see you, and I'm good to know that you're alive. How's your exams going? And Pure Care, unbelievably, says, I've never been to a restaurant. That is absolutely fantastic. Fantastic in the sense of unbelievable. All right, next, do you often people's mistakes? Why or why not? So, once again, I'd like you to tell me what phrasal verb is missing there. What do you think is the missing phrasal verb there? Meanwhile, Takeshi says, the last time I checked out a new restaurant was ages ago. I don't normally eat out. Well, Takeshi, I don't know where you're from. I keep thinking Japan, but if you're from anywhere near Japan, well, if you're from any country like Japan, it's really expensive to eat out. Most expensive countries in the world to eat out? Switzerland, Holland, Sweden, the UK, Japan. Most expensive countries in the world to eat out, in my opinion. These are from countries I've visited. I'm not doing a study or anything there. That's right, everybody. Well done. The answer is point out. Do you often point out people's mistakes? Why or why not? Answers in the chat. What do you think about this? Are you the kind of person who often points out people's mistakes? Why not? Let me know. I'm the kind of person who sometimes points out people's mistakes. I think for me, it depends on a few things. If I think they can do something more efficiently, as in I think it's beneficial for them, so if it's related to technology often, then I may well point out their mistakes. I will also do it with English, obviously, as a teacher. However, with that, I always use delayed error correction. Very rarely do I do on-the-spot correction. Did you hear that sentence? Very rarely do I do on-the-spot correction. Very rarely do I do on-the-spot correction. I do it with Manuel Gordillo sometimes. Because we never have time to do delayed error correction because he has too much to tell me. So I have to do on-the-spot correction. Sleepwalker says it depends on how long I've known a person. And Sonia Butterini says sometimes it depends what kind of mistake it is. Pallavi says my exams are going well, but suddenly I got a headache. I don't know why. Me too. I've got a headache, Pallavi. I've had a headache for 2 days. Okay, let's move on. Do you think it's important that meetings and classes finish on time? Or is it sometimes okay to moo? Do you think it's important that meetings and classes finish on time? Or is it sometimes okay to Sleepwalker says, Rich, what about your students? Do you always correct them during their speech? So, correcting during speech is called on-the-spot correction, Sleepwalker, and that is not the type of correction which I use. I don't use on-the-spot correction a lot. I normally use delayed error correction. So delayed error correction means that I note the error and then we discuss the errors afterwards. It's important because if you use on-the-spot error correction, it can damage students' fluency and confidence. And any reasonable language teacher knows that fluency is more important than absolute accuracy. The answer here is run over. Run over means exceed the time limit. Run over. And we're not going to discuss that one. We're just going to move on. So I would like you here to match the phrasal verbs to the rest of the phrase. So these are complete phrases that are completed by the phrasal verb. And here's your phrasal verbs with the verb highlighted on the left there. And I want you to match this part here, the phrasal verb part, with the rest of the phrase to make a complete phrase. We don't need the full stops here, actually, so I'm going to just get rid of that. And you can type your answers there in the chat. In addition, I will move myself out of the way because I'm way too big. There we go. Go up a little bit. Seems about right. Something like that. Okay. Answers in the chat. Matching the column on the left with the phrases on the right. Could you move your head, please, says Manuel. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's right, Anawat. You've been saying that phrase all class, so makes sense that you got it. And indeed, that is the correct answer. I'll give you another 2 minutes or so for that. One more minute, folks. Get those answers in right now. Pallavi says, really? Teacher, you know, when I get the question paper, my hands always tremble to write the answers, but I feel normal after an hour. It's 2 hours of exams. It's interesting that, Pallavi. I do think that confidence plays a big role in exams, actually. And when I was younger, I used to be very, very confident in exams. Never used to really worry about them. And I performed very well, actually. In fact, sometimes I even looked forward to exams. However, I did take an exam a couple of years ago for my master's, and there was someone in the exam room who was kind of breathing heavily. And within 5 minutes, I realized the exam was quite difficult. And the noise from the other person really started to bother me. And I found it so difficult to concentrate. And the whole exam became really difficult because of that. I started to panic. And I guess that's the problem with exams. You have a bad day and it's a big problem. I really don't believe in exams, by the way. I understand the necessity for them, but I am anti-exam as a teacher. I would very much prefer to use other means of assessment. I do understand there are many problems with other means of assessment, but I have confidence in my own ability to assess without using exams. All right, I'm going to give you some answers in about 30 seconds. Get your guesses in. Get your answers in quickly for the solutions here. All right. Here come some answers, and this is going to be in the form of pronunciation. It's mouth cam, and if you like mouth cam, then smash that like button. So here we go. This is pronunciation, and you should listen to the phrase, listen to me pronounce the phrase, and then replay in your head, and then try to say it. All right? Okay, number 1. Catch up on emails after a holiday. Number 2. Fall behind in class when you don't do homework. Number 3. Keep up with the latest technology. Notice with that one, the joining there. Keep up with the latest technology. Number 4. Come across an old friend in town. Number 5. Come up with a solution to the problem. Number 6. Deal with stressful situations. Number 7. Back up an argument with some facts. Number 8. Run out of milk. I think we've run out of milk. And the final one. Look forward to Christmas. I always look forward to Christmas. All right, and there are your answers in the notes, should you wish to see them in the notes. Let's have a discussion. Have you ever? So you can see here we have the phrasal verbs from the class. I would like you to ask have you ever questions in the chat. Make sure that you use the correct form of the verb. So for example, fall behind should in fact be have you ever fallen behind. Go over should be have you ever gone over. And hang on should be have you ever hung on. Okay, so have you ever, and then making questions using the words. So, for example, have you ever? Have you ever? Here we go. I'm typing one in the chat now. Have you ever ran out of chocolate at Christmas? And I've used the past instead of the past participle, which is a common thing to do by English people, actually. British people especially. Have you ever run out of chocolate at Christmas? So you can answer that question by saying Rich, no, or Rich, no, because I don't celebrate Christmas. Only Eid, for example. And I'm going to reappear. So making questions in the chat, making interesting questions using the vocabulary, and then if you wish, responding to those questions also in the chat. Sleepwalker says, have you ever been spooked while watching a horror movie? So be spooked was not one of our phrasal verbs. But yes, that's a good have you ever. So a good possibility for you there, instead of be spooked, could be freak out. Have you ever freaked out? Have you ever freaked out while watching a horror movie? Let's just say, have you ever freaked out while watching horror? Has your local store ever run out of stock? Has your local store ever run out of stock, Julia? Never have I run out of chocolate at Christmas because chocolate is not my cup of tea. Well done, Takeshi. I'm going to pin that. It's funny. Never have I run out of chocolate at Christmas because chocolate is not my cup of tea. Have you ever gone through a difficult situation? Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? And a good follow-up question to that is, tell me about it. Have you ever gone through a difficult situation? Tell me about it. Sounds like something that you would be asked by an IELTS examiner. Make sure that you do smash that like button, folks, if you are enjoying the stream today. We have been streaming for 1 hour, and today we're talking about phrasal verbs. Have you ever fallen behind in a race, says Manuela Gordillo. You know, today I think I'm going to have some ribs. Have you ever come across a person who has a quirky sense of humour? Yes. Loads. And all kinds of quirky as well. All kinds of quirky senses of humour, actually. Have you ever asked out? I think you need some more words there, Sleepwalker. We could say, have you ever asked out your crush? Have you ever asked out someone? Have you ever been asked out? Have you ever dealt with a difficult person, says Renit. Ooh, good one. Have you ever tucked into insects, says Takeshi. Okay, you are Japanese. Stop lying. Or are you from Hong Kong? Have you ever joined in a random wedding party? Nice one, Ashley Chen. We could actually use the word gate crash there. Have you ever gate crashed a wedding? Have you ever gate crashed a wedding? Fantastic. All right, folks, well done. Excellent practice there. And here is the homework assignment. This is the homework assignment from Saturday's class. And the deadline for that is the 9th of the 12th. So that would be the coming Saturday. The homework assignment is to research a world mystery from the past. Give your opinion on the theories. Record a 3-minute audio and send that to me on our Discord server. That's our free chat server. You can join our free chat server at bit.ly/englearnchat. The link is in the chat right now for you to record that audio and send us your homework. We're now on to question time. If you want to download the notes from today, you can do. I will put the notes in the description down below. In addition, I will put the notes in the class, the chat there. And we come to question time. So, does anyone have any questions about English? If you have any questions about English, feel free to ask me those questions right now, and I will do my best to answer those questions. Any questions about English, ask them in the chat right now, and I'll do my best. Anawat says, I don't really talk English in my daily stuff. How can I remember those phrasal verbs when I come across them? You kind of can't. So when it comes to recognition and passive vocabulary, Anawat, I would say don't stress, don't worry, just treat them like any other piece of vocabulary. Don't try to learn tons of phrasal verbs. Often you can guess the meaning of an unknown verb or verb phrase from context, and if you can't, then it might require some clarification. But I certainly would not spend all your time trying to learn all the phrasal verbs, okay? That's not possible. That's not how we're going to deal with this. You need to deal with this by just becoming a competent communicator who is able to deal with unknown vocabulary, and phrasal verbs are just another form of vocabulary. Takeshi says, communicative English taught in schools should not be graded. What's your take on it? I'm not so sure about not graded, Takeshi. I don't know. What do you mean by graded? Because if you mean the teacher if you mean some form of assessment, I think that I think that we need assessment. I think that we do need assessment. It's just that I don't believe strongly in exams. I prefer other forms of assessment. And as someone who has quite a bit of confidence in their teaching ability, I have faith in my ability to assess people as we go through the course. I can't remember what that type of assessment's called. I think it's the opposite of formative. No, it is formative. Formative assessment. I'm a big believer in formative assessment as a teacher. Now, I know that I don't trust all teachers to be good at formative assessment because obviously if you have a corrupt teacher, then formative assessment does not work, which is why we use summative assessment. Summative assessment is exams and so on. To summarize, yes, I do believe that communicative English should be graded. However, I'm not sure that A to F really makes sense for communicative English. it should really be a case of communicative achievement, and students should be grouped by ability, not by age. That's a good point, Takeshi, and that's why I think the students should be grouped by their level and not by their age. So, for example, if your English is very basic, then you should be in the basic English class, and you should still get a good grade for passing basic English, just like you get a good grade for passing advanced English. And in a school sense, those grades should be equivalent. However, obviously in the real world, advanced English is more important. But obviously that will alleviate the stress. If you're a beginner, then you can go into the beginner class and still get an A, which would be actually elementary English or A1 English. So the key point there is really that students, particularly in English as a communicative skill, should be grouped by ability and not by age. Obviously, you need a limit on that. You can't put 6-year-olds with 13-year-olds. That does not work. But you can put 6-year-olds with 9-year-olds. And you can put 15-year-olds with 13-year-olds. Takeshi, schools anywhere don't work like that. Nobody sticks to that. And in fact, rather disappointingly, the British Council Hanoi went the other way. They stopped grouping students by ability and started grouping them by age. Some people think that's the way to go. I personally don't think that makes sense to me. Do ka-ching and cha-ching mean the same? Yes, they do, Sleepwalker. Ka-ching, cha-ching. They are exactly the same. Pallavi says, teacher, I want to ask, what does this line mean? I'm the common bellman that usually is sent to condemned persons. That sounds like a line from a play, and I have no idea what a common bellman is. But condemned person sounds like someone who's going to be executed. Anawat says, are all phrasal verbs informal? No, they are not. There's an example of a formal use of a phrasal verb. I look forward to hearing your response. That's a formal phrase. However, on the whole, that is, on average, phrasal verbs are colloquial or informal. That's true. But there are exceptions. All right, everybody, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been my pleasure. My name has been ProfRich, and I really do hope that you have a lovely, lovely week and that you come and join me on Saturday. I'll be streaming on Oxford Online English, and that is the third to last stream. We are finishing streaming on Oxford Online English. Ollie has decided to not continue with that. They have not gained the subscribers which Ollie intended, and he has other plans for the channel. So there's 3 more left. Feel free to direct people to come and subscribe to ProfRich, because it's the only place that you'll get this teaching in future. I do intend to carry on streaming on ProfRich because we're doing quite well over here, actually. Not that well, but yeah, I get like £2 a stream now. Thank you. £2 That means I can have like half a coffee for like an hour and a half of streaming, which takes about 4 or 5 hours of work in total. But hey, we're getting there, folks, and I really appreciate the support. So thank you very much. Do comment down below if you have any suggestions, and come and join us on the Discord server. I pay heavy attention to any personal requests I receive, so do feel free to make a personal request. Thank you very much once again. Smash that like button if you haven't already, and I will see you on Saturday.